Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Genius post-game coverage. I am so excited to be here. It has been way too long, and I am here with some incredible guests. We're going to be interviewing the game designer here. I had to make sure I knew I had someone here to do in and out. We have the one and only Dwight Moore. Dwight, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm excited to be talking about the games today. I love games. I've talked before. I love like the rules learning of stuff. So I'm really excited to get to talk about this. So I'm glad to get to be here. Thank you.
And we have a very special guest. Alex, who is one of the people who actually worked on the games team for Genius Game to answer all of our questions about everything that went down this season of Genius Game. It is Alex McMillan. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Zach. It's lovely to see you and Dwight. Thank you so much for having me on.
Alex, so obviously I feel like being part of like a games team for a reality show, it's not really the kind of job that you hear about at Career Day. So I'm just curious, like, what was your backstory with, I guess, strategy games in general, with reality TV in general? How did you get this job, and and the Genius as well, specifically? So how did you get this job in the first place? Where did it all start?
Yeah, it's a bit of a convoluted story, as I feel like is a running thing with people in television in general. Like, people kind of fall into it. I had done a game development degree at university, specifically to do with like video games, and I did a sort of dissertation on why Mario Kart's blue shell doesn't work. And so I was very into like the sort of weeds of like mechanics. And thank you, Dwight. It's important research.
If we need that, yes, please.
And so I was like always really invested in mechanics, but initially I thought video games is what I wanted to get into. Doing that degree taught me that I hate programming, and I just enjoy the sort of invention of mechanics. And I'd always been a fan of like quiz shows and game shows, so I kind of got on-ramped via that. I stopped looking for video game work, and luckily like a quiz show that's quite big in the UK called Mastermind had just moved over to Belfast, where I live. So I was able to get some work on that, and from that I was able to get like connections to other TV shows. And I've been writing for a lot of like quiz shows in the UK for about sort of 8 years now. My sort of most prolific one is a show called Only Connect, which is a sort of very complicated and archaic little show, but one I love very much.
No, I love Only Connect. My roommate in college actually was a huge Only Connect fan.
Oh, wonderful!
And then they bit off your guys' whole shtick with the connections puzzles.
I was actually talking today about how embittered I am about that. I have a big cross to bear when it comes to NYT games on that. But you know, look, hey, the real people know we had it first. But yeah, that was sort of my into like television. But before that, I'd loved watching like reality shows. Like I watched the UK version of Big Brother for a long time, and I think my first into like proper reality shows, like not ones that rely solely on public vote, was The Mole. I remember seeing The Mole on like a channel that was like, you know, no one but me was watching, and that sort of got me in the door on like, oh, okay, so there are other ways to like do this. It doesn't have to be a popularity contest, quote unquote. There can be game rules. There can be like interesting little wrinkles going on. Like it is a controllable game. And from that, I just sort of like, I realized these were all being made like outside of the UK. Like we just don't have those. And so I had to go and find them online. I ended up watching a lot of Survivor. My first in was The Amazing Race. Then I moved on to Survivor. Then I moved on to Big Brother Canada specifically. Then sort of everything in a larger remit. I came to the Genius, the Korean version, in 2015, I want to say. I think I'd found it on a website called Bother's Bar, who is sort of the hub when it comes to like UK game show coverage. And they'd been talking about this Korean show that was like, oh, they like kind of play a different board game every single week, but you know, there's like archaic rules and there's a currency system and it's all really high level. And I just remember getting hooked by it. I was like, you know, and it's such a culture shock because it's like, oh my God, these episodes are like 2 hours long and there's so many effects going on. And like, there is music they obviously don't have the license for, just like blaring in every single direction. And I was hooked by it. I was just absolutely obsessed. see, I've got these like white whale shows that I've always been kind of desperate to work on. Like I've always wanted to work on some iteration of Survivor. I've always wanted to work on some iteration of The Mole. But the main thing was always Genius Game. Like I was obsessed with it, and it just seemed like the most creatively fulfilling show to like be part of. So I've kind of been chasing it wherever it ended up in the UK. Like the rights have been bounced around a lot of different places in the last decade, and basically every single time it ends up in a different company, I was in their inboxes like, hello, I know this show, can you please let me work on it? The last time happened to be the one that hit, and they sort of let me on board from the beginning, which is very kind of them. And yeah, the rest is history.
Love that. I was curious. So yeah, working on GTK. How many other game designers do work on the show alongside you? Like, how many people are part of that game design team?
So we've got a team of, I want to say about like 8 to 10 people. It's a really, really good team, like led by Anna Kidd, who designed a lot of the stuff on Squid Game, the challenge, and before that, she designed the sort of games for the remake of The Crystal Maze, which is a show that sort of means a lot of people to people in the UK, but outside of the UK, not as much. And then we also had like, alongside me, there was like 6 or 7 other people who were like more junior than Anna, but we're all very experienced when it came to game design and working in television. I don't want to start naming them in case I forget some of them. So I'll leave it at they are a good team, and I was very happy to be part of it. But I was always sort of the genius fan on the team. Like there was a lot of other people who were like, we're making a good TV show. And I was like, this is like the thing that matters most in the world to me.
So I think maybe the thing that's most interesting to me is like, you obviously get this job, right? It's an amazing job, dream job. And then you're just essentially handed like, all right, we've got 8 episodes. That means like essentially 8 main matches, 8 death matches. Like we've got nothing. You guys put something together. So can you walk us through like how do the games themselves get decided? How like who works on what? And how do you like actually fill the season out with what is basically this and the cast are the 2 most important parts of the entire show? So how do the games even like get developed?
Yeah, so again, that's quite a like long-winded thing. Like that starts basically when the show's getting pitched. So I happened to sort of get in the door when we were talking with ITV quite early on. And it was a case of, okay, we need to look at the games that really worked on the Korean version and to a lesser extent the Dutch version. And we need to sort of explain why those games are appealing to an audience. So the first step was kind of going through the back catalog and being like, okay, which of these games do we like played well, and we think we can explain to someone who has never seen the show why they're appealing. So I started with, I think one of the first games we looked at was Election Game, which is, I think, from that series 1.
Yep.
And we sort of had a different title we were working on it with, which was Can I Count on Your Vote? And we were sort of explaining this idea of like, okay, there's this sort of like ghost currency that like could become real if you vote for a person, but it's this sort of interlocking web of alliances. And we sort of went through that episode and storyboarded it and said, okay, here are the threads of the narrative. Here's what happened. Here's what could have happened. Here are the potential outcomes. Here were the really clever things people did. And we did that for like 10 of the games. Then once we'd got the series sort of commissioned, the game team looked at, okay, we want a handful of original games and we want a lot of new games, because we saw that the Dutch version had no new stuff and it felt a little hollow because of that. So really what it came down to was, okay, what sort of simple mechanics can we think of that will work as a playground for like people to kind of like find exploits in? Because our big thing was, we don't want to design like puzzles to be solved. We want to design like sandboxes that people can come up with their own organic, clever strategies in. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's do like a specific example from that one, right? So one of the games that you guys chose to bring back was Zombie Game, which obviously as like Genius fans, we know that game is kind of solved, right? With the Ben, the strategy that he implemented of just creating like the safety square, the bubble, they called it. So
I've never heard it called a safety square. That's a good name.
I just made that up. It could be a diamond, could be a parallelogram, anything with 4 sides, really. So when you're bringing a game like that back, is there any part of you that's like, okay, what can we do to change this game? Because that game I remember was like identical to how it was in the Korean version. Did you guys consider like maybe making some changes to the original games to try to trip up players like Ben?
Yeah, totally. This was something that like we talked about with basically every game we looked at bringing back. I can't quite remember the other ones that we thought about bringing back that we didn't do. I might look at my notes later and see if I can remember. But in basically every case, it was, okay, this game played out in this way. Do we think the game will always play out in this way? And if not, or if it will, what can we do to change that? And in the case of Zombie Game, I think we'd had some ideas for like alternative mechanisms. The big thing was it was one of the more complicated games to explain to an audience. And because we knew we were putting it on quite early, I think there was a consideration of, okay, if we add more elements here, we risk this becoming really difficult for an audience that are onboarding. And I think what we were hoping was the game is sort of solved with the safety square, the defense diamond, the protection parallelogram.
Yeah.
But it's not fully like ironclad. Like it could be burst, it could be miscalculated. Ultimately, it still becomes a game of trust. So the idea was that that is a possible outcome, but it's an outcome that still has like narrative sort of juice to it. We wouldn't have brought back like, I mean, this is the reason, we weren't going to do open pass because we'd seen, okay, they did open pass on the Dutch version. The best thing you can hope to happen in open pass is that the Jinho moment happens again, which can't happen. And also if it did, it wouldn't be as exciting as when it originally happened.
Sure.
Whereas on Zombie Game, there is an element of, okay, maybe they make the bubble, maybe it bursts, maybe they make the bubble, maybe the other side make a bubble, and then it's a sort of, a leveling war. Okay, no, we think you're the ones that are actually in the wrong here.
I'm kind of curious because you mentioned, you didn't want to do Zombie Game like super early because like the rules complication could be confusing to the audience. So the first game you guys chose to do was Bank Heist, right? I'm kind of curious because I remember when I was reading when the show first came out, some people in the British audience were confused about the rules for that one too. So did you expect that kind of reaction from Bank Heist, given that was the first game, or like I was curious about your perspective on that?
I was very much not expecting that reaction from people. It's tough because if I look back at Gold Heist, I would still say that's quite a simple game, all in all. It is a case of there are 3 kind of pools of money. You stake your claim to a bit of that money. If too many people stake their claim, you will go to jail. Beyond that, there's like a tip-off rule, but you don't need to understand that to get the basics of the game. It's my personal opinion that like people who were reviewing the show didn't like it. It wasn't for them. And it's a very easy complaint to make about something that begins with rules when you don't like it, to be like, oh, it's too complicated, I didn't get it. And it was a big criticism of the show from those reviews being like, this show is speaking down to me and it's sort of pretending to be intellectual and it's making me feel dumb, but I'm not dumb, which, I think says more about the reviewer than the product itself. But it's tricky. Like, you want the game to have enough meat that like people who know what the genius is and want to watch the genius can look at this and say, yes, this is what a genius main match looks like. But also if we jump in with something, if we jumped in with anything lighter than this, I just think it wouldn't be the genius. And anything heavier than this is going to draw the same criticisms.
Well, it felt like such a genius game when it was explained to us, and then I felt like if we're going to go to Bank Heist specifically, it was basically like laid out perfectly, and then they were like, oh, and then the one more thing of the tip-off rule. And then what we see with the tip-off rule, right, is that basically is the only rule in the entire game that truly mattered because of how the players ended up using it, putting Paul into jail. It was a decided outcome from essentially like the beginning of like the third round, or really the beginning of the first round. Once that strategy was decided and executed, obviously you're not able to control like how the players play once the game is decided. But for a game like that, first of all, like we can go into the specifics of like was there meant to be like counterplay for something like that? Was that obviously something that you guys had considered when you were designing the game, that how the tip off could be manipulated? And then second, how much as a broader question, I'm getting too excited. Let's answer the first question and then I'll get into
so it is tricky because ultimately, like, there is that big thing with the tip-offs that if you land on the strategy that Scott did, it is quite pinpoint targeted on one person. I think I've got the controversial take that I don't mind that. Like, I think that is a cool way that the game played out. Like, it gave us a narrative ability to go like, oh my god, this one guy was screwed from the start because these people found a plan and like put it into action right away. I also would argue that Paul had outs. He had the ability to, like, he basically got told by both sides, like, you should have stayed in round 3, and then he chose not to anyway. Mechanically, we could have put in like some sort of counter. And I think, if we had our way again, we definitely, knowing what we know now, we wouldn't put in games that sort of allow a majority to sort of breeze block it. But for being the first 1, 2, 3 game, so like 1, 2, 3 game has the obvious solve. It has a solve that once someone realizes, like, oh, actually, we can automatically make someone lose if we just burn all our cards right away. Like, it doesn't matter. And so we were kind of going for that same thing of, okay, there is this path that if you take it, if you realize it's there and you take it, someone will lose and it won't be you. And we didn't want to do the same puzzle. So I think we were happy with, like, okay, we've landed on something that's like a more social game. It's not, as mathematical as 1, 2, 3 game. It's a bit more interplay, but it still has that.
Kind of building off that, like you mentioned, it's assuming you don't want to play not to lose. I think, like, given the nature of the genius, it's the deathmatch hand is going to go in automatically, and they choose the person going in. Where these games designed with that concept in mind of, oh, these players may not play for the win, they're going to play just to not lose. And like, was it also did you want some games where players are going to play to win instead? Like, maybe make the garnets matter a bit more in the long term? Because I don't think any main matches really incorporated garnets during the season. Is that a consideration that y'all had during the design process of the season of the Genius?
Yeah, it's interesting. There were a few instances where we had like garnet purchasing abilities in the games, and they just didn't make the edit because no one used them, essentially. So in Light Exchange, for instance, there was the ability that you could spend a garnet to look in your case again and sort of double check what you had in it. That was never in the edit because no one ever used it. And basically it was a case of, okay, if this is in the edit and then it never comes up, we've already got we're already facing this criticism of, oh, there are too many rules. And if we have the ability to cut one of those rules because it never comes up in the game, we probably should. I wasn't in the edit, so I don't know if that's what happened, but there were a few instances of like things that just never came up. And I think in Code Breakers, there were the clues you could buy. Like, Ben bought one immediately and then never opened it. So from an editorial perspective, it's like, okay, I don't know. Do we say what that was? Like, it seemed a bit tricky to work around, but definitely that was something I wanted, is that more like, more movement of garnets. It was just difficult to motivate people to use them. And part of me thinks that comes down to just like a bit of a philosophical difference between how game shows in the UK work versus how they work in other places. We are very conservative with a small c about prize money. We don't like gambling things. We don't like risking things. And I think you see this in episode 1. Charlotte in a confessional talks about how she's given away £1,000 to India when she gives her garnet away. And so I think any time we gave them the ability to do something with garnets, it was like, I'm not going to burn £1,000 on that. So that was kind of a tricky thing to work around.
I think maybe like one of the, either like an open pass style game, which is just a total garnet sink, where like I remember in the Korean version, I think they lost like 18 or something garnets from that challenge alone. Or like a garnet match in itself where, that obviously was a big way of making the garnets really matter. So when you're, I do want to go back to the first part of that question, like outside of the garnets. I felt like maybe our biggest criticism of the whole season was that there were too many people who didn't actually care about winning the games and only cared about not losing. So once the loser was decided, it felt like the rest of the episode was just didn't matter. In retrospect, how do you guys think that you could have combated that?
Yeah, that's quite tricky, and it's definitely something that, like, I think we would agree. I certainly agree with that. You know, like, I love this cast, but ultimately it's a thing that happens, I think, in UK television. Like, our reality shows are not really designed for high risk players. Like, those people were shunned in the early 2000s. I think we had like one guy on our version of Big Brother in 2000 who attempted to do something to get ahead in the game, and he became like a national villain from the newspapers. If you've never heard of Nasty Nick, Google him. He's a big deal for some reason. But I think we were kind of up against that ultimately. It's like we had cast people who are very clever and know how to play the game, and we tested it. We tested all these games to show, okay, look, if people are playing to win, we have these interesting storylines. We have the ways that these mechanisms can play out. I think the problem was it's just really difficult to like test how this is going to work out when the stakes are like £50,000 real. And that is something that I suppose, yeah, I'm trying to think now. If we did it again, I suspect something that you do is you motivate like Garnet plays. Like, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. I would have loved to have done a Garnet match. Something that I really wanted to try and do was the game Mafia. Is it Cuba del Mafia or Mafia del Cuba? I don't remember which way around that game is. But it's like one where you like pass a cigar box around with gems in it. And I always thought that would be the base of like a really good game of like, okay, so one person's Garnet bag is just like passed around, people can steal from it, and then like that always felt like a fun base to me of like, okay, this game is actively stealing other people's Garnets. And then I think I got that from in series 4 of the Korean version when there was a game called Garnet Thief, and I got really excited about it, and then the actual game was not as fun as I had hoped it had been in my head.
Was that the finally like the 4v4? It
was the one that had little clickers, I think. They were like told that some of them were robbers and some of them were the police.
And Kyung-hoon was the betrayal. It was like the main characters versus the side characters, and Kyung-hoon betrayed. I remember that one.
Cameos revolt. But yeah, it is tricky because you want to leave the game open and like let the players sort of shine, and we did see that. When you get to the end of the series and you look at something like Media Moguls, like that moment with Ken sort of happens for like a whole bunch of reasons. Like, okay, Ken knows he can't get automatically eliminated, so he feels safer. He feels he can go for the win here. Bex is literally standing there motivating him, like hyping him up to do it, as I found out later. And I'm like, okay, so we can have these plays. It's just they have to happen under very like specific circumstances.
The read that I got on that one specifically, and this was something that I think we were discussing, is one of the highlights, and I think the best change that was made was I thought that the 3-person death match was so cool at the end. Something that we were discussing was how the Genius has always been a game where it's 2 people in the death match, but that's only because that's just the way that it's been. I feel like because like the perfect example of this on the season, right, was Lights Out. The moment that Bedalia's like, oh, I'm choosing a Monfy, the episode's over. Like, there's no point in continuing the game. Versus by varying the death match count of like some episodes maybe having 3 people, some episodes having 4 people in the death match. The more people that are unsafe, basically, that's going to be the more people who are actually fighting for that token of life. Was that a consideration at all, considering that like you guys do end up doing it at the final 5?
Yeah, we talked about how we're going to deal with the fact that we have more players than episodes. And it had bounced around a bit. Like, I think we'd had a few ideas for, okay, what can we do that works with 3 players? I think we looked at adapting some of the original ones to see, because like something like RHAP, like you can do that with 3. Like they just work with whatever number of people you've got. But there had also been considerations of, do we do like a double death match? Do we do, okay, because we've seen this with like Tactical Yutnori, where it's like they both pick a partner. It's like, what if that partner was also, vulnerable? Like, is that something we'd considered? We considered, okay, do we do a final with 4 people and then it's like death matches go down to 2, like in a little bracket? I think we landed on the 3-person because Anna had the idea for dice deception, and she was like, okay, we know this works as a game. We know it works significantly better with 3 people because you end up in that crunch position of you have to kind of, you don't want to use your bluff tokens, but you need a bluff token to get used. So it's a whole game of like trying to apply pressure to that third party. And personally, that's why I think we ended up doing the 3-player thing. I do think I would be open to the idea of, you know, multiple people eliminations, because we've seen that work well in like Devil's Plan. Like the idea that like one game in Devil's Plan can wipe out 5 people is really cool. I just think it's something that works better on streaming. As much as I hate that, because I love non-streaming TV. I want it to not die, but I think part of the sell there was that consistency of, we know one person's getting eliminated each time. If it was a twist, I could definitely see it coming up in the middle. Just like, I do worry about how we do that without making it look really archaic, like just looking like, oh, they decided to wipe 2 people out here now because
not even like a 3-person deathmatch that necessarily has to eliminate 2 people, right? Like just changing up the numbers of the deathmatch and then still having like the 1 person eliminated. Was just something that we were thinking of, or like changing up like each episode. Maybe it's like different games could have like different token. Obviously, we already have that, where like the token of life can be changed game by game. Some have multiple winners, some have only one. Doing the same with the deathmatch.
You have an episode with like 3 teams of 3 compete, and the last team of 3 goes to the deathmatch, all 3 of them, and only one gets eliminated. Like you could like change it up, varying on how many people are alive or how many people are in.
I mean, it's certainly not something I'd be against at all. Like, I think it's a case of figuring out what is core to making this show feel like the genius, and what do you not need to keep. And ultimately, I was surprised that people weren't as critical of the 3-person thing. Like, I was worried that was going to be a big backlash of like, this is not how the show works. Death matches are supposed to be between 2 people. This is written in scripture. But that was not the case. People were really, really like pleasantly surprised by it. So, you know,
it was the best episode.
Really good.
Thank you very much. I had some hand in that, so I feel good that you guys like that.
I definitely want to ask about that.
But yeah. Oh, sorry, Dwight.
I was gonna ask about one of the other original games that you guys created, Codebreakers. This one, I really enjoyed this one. I worked on this a bit personally, trying to solve it by hand. I was curious for the design perspective. So of course we saw it play out. There's a secret agent in Ben who kind of just immediately said, like, overtook the game basically. A first question for you, like, was that ever expected for someone to do? Like, when you guys tested this, did someone ever attempt to even just say, hey, stop, I'm going to do this real fast, everyone listen to me? Or did that just come up because of the nature of the game? There's this regular deathmatch on the line, and they're going to be playing for themselves.
There was a lot of things that happened that personally I didn't expect, and almost all of those were because Ben was there. Like, Ben was just playing in a way that, like, I don't think we had anticipated. And I remember that was the last episode I was in studio for. So like my like leaving the studio party was after that. Not party, but like people were like saying goodbye to me that day. And I just remember sitting there watching it like, oh my God, the whole show is like crumbling around us. How are they going to edit this? We didn't play the game. Like, I was losing my mind. But basically the rest of the team were sort of like, I mean, yeah, he did something unexpected. That's sort of like the MO of the show to some degree. And so I kind of, in hindsight, feel better about it. Like, I still think I'm annoyed they didn't do the word. Like, because ultimately I'm like, look, we like that it's a word game. We like word games. It's the one time we designed a puzzle to be solved. And then there was like, oh, they subverted it. Okay, we should have seen that coming. That's on us.
Well, it's the difference between like breaking the game and hijacking the game. And it felt like that was one. And I think in the Genius, we saw that. I think the only instance we could see someone so severely like hijack a game was the Doohy episode. What was it? Miner's Game, I think? Or no, it was Monopoly Game. Yeah.
Miner's Game was the one where Dongmin had the very supple hands.
Subtle touch, yeah. So I want to ask about another controversial game from this season. It was probably the angriest that we were through the entire show, and it was the rock paper scissors death match.
Oh, I
I
thought you
think
guys
that
loved that one.
to eliminate my favorite player of all time, Amalfi. Yeah, it felt like if there was anything to leave at the door of the original Genius, it was the games like this, and it felt like it played out exactly how we would expect it to play out in a really boring way. So what was the appeal of that for you guys?
So that game played really well in testing. That was the big difference, was like we tested that game, and when the stakes weren't high, like people really like politicked, and people ended up with like an interesting like dynamic in the cards. Like you ended up with people saying, you know, like, okay, I want you to give me rock and give this other person paper. And it's like, okay, can you give me a garnet to ensure I'll do that? They took the garnet, they gave them the wrong cards anyway. And then it's like a victimless crime because it's like, you don't know what card I gave you ultimately. And we knew it was an element of the original. So it was like, you know, you had these social games, you had these like social death matches. And we're like, okay, well, that's part of the show. We should see how that works here. And like, that's why we tested it ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that when it played out, yeah, you got this result. Like, I'm not sure if the rest of the team kind of like saw that coming. I didn't expect it to kind of be that like unanimous. Because ultimately,
I guess that's the difference between like the play test versus the actual game where like in the play test it's like these are two random people, I don't actually care, versus in the actual game people will have strong feelings about who to go home. And I get we got the worst case scenario of like someone that was very trusted versus not.
And the game that was played that day also resulted in a direct betrayal of somebody due to the black box. So it's just like, I guess, an unfortunate circumstance of that main match going with that death match, or if that was intended.
It's totally, in my personal opinion, I don't think that's something that would ever, like, you know, touch wood, if we got a second go around, I don't think tactical rock, paper, scissors come back. I think if we have a social death match, it would definitely be something more in keeping with, okay, other people can help you, but they can't shut you out.
Or even if all the players had been like isolated into a room by themselves and got to make their choice, like, you know, with
I mean, that was the thing, like,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Zach.
No, it's all good. But yeah, that was the one choice in terms of all the games where we were like just banging our head against a wall.
Like we when we did the test, like, so we ran the full show in a sort of rehearsal in studio. Like, I was one of the guinea pigs who like tested the games out, and yeah, the version of rock paper scissors that happens in testing is so much more fluid. It is people running from room to room and making deals and like switching stuff. It just so happened that, like, because they all clumped in the lounge, it became that sort of game of like, okay, well, no one can be the first person to leave because then that person's, you know, going to be in trouble with the rest of the group. And then it becomes that game of, okay, well, we'll both just make a speech in front of the whole group. I think there is a version of that game that could have turned out more interesting, but yeah, ultimately it's a low point. Like, I think we all know that.
I guess to talk about another game that got brought back, that was a classic. I think it was in the touchscreen version, in the Dutch version. Diamond Dilemma, Kong's Dilemma. What made you guys bring that one back? I'm curious about that decision too. I like that game a lot.
I love that game. Like, that's one of my favorites. And I had like pushed for that like early doors whenever we were like talking about, you know, okay, what were the games from the original that we're going to pitch to ITV? And I was like, Diamond Dilemma is great because it is really simple to explain and has immediate depth. So it's like, because you can explain the problem of it really easy, which you can't necessarily do with some of the more complicated games. But I found it really helpful that you could be like, okay, here are the rules. You've got this many diamonds. You need to ensure that your team has the most diamonds in the vase, but you need to have the most diamonds at the end in order to win on your team. And instantly everyone's like, oh, that's a problem. So I think that's why we ultimately decided to bring that. Also, it's a great game for 6. Like, once you get down to that number, I don't think there are many games that are up there like for a 6-player, sort of number, other than Diamond Dilemma. also knowing that like potential solve was there and has never happened, like on the other versions, I was like, okay, it could happen. And if it does, that'll look really cool. Like, it's one of those rare examples of a game that existed in the Korean version that had this like really like sexy looking solve that had just like eluded everyone. And we're like, okay, if it happens, it happens, and that'll be cool. But also, I don't think it will happen because it requires an insane level of trust.
And that's one of those solves too that, like, unlike a solve like the Paul solve in episode 1, if that solve were to happen, that's one that you could really save till the very end, flashback, and then, oh my god, the game that we've been watching this whole time is totally different.
Right.
And I know you weren't involved in like the editing or anything like that, but were there like more moments that you think could have been like flashback? Did you have any thoughts on that specific editing style?
Yeah, it's tough looking back at it, but like when I was in studio, there were definitely moments where I was like, okay, I feel like this is the moment I flash back to. Like there was a few things you saw and you were like, okay, if I'm gonna play Extreme Ways, that, like, you know, when Ken bounces the check, I'm like, great, okay,
Of course.
That's Extreme Ways right there. But even in episode 1, like when you look back at Gold Heist, when Scott gathers everyone, like, to me, I was like, oh cool, this seems like the flashback moment. I think it could have been edited differently to obscure more what was going on. I think if there had been enough footage of people on Ben's side getting annoyed at Paul, I think they could have like hammed that up a bit, and then it was like, oh, it was actually these 6 people over here. And I sort of think, you know, for Baby's first Genius episode, I'm like, okay, maybe that is the sort of level of flashback that you want. But yeah, in the other games, I think ultimately, like, Codebreakers was our time to, if Amanfi had gone on to solve the word, like, that's where, you know, that's when you do a flash forward. That's when you do a cool thing with that. And so, I mean, I can tell you, I was on the edge of my seat, like, sitting there when he was in that dealer's room. I was like, please, please just do the word. Please.
Yeah. Just another quick question. Oh, just a question also about Codebreakers, kind of, yeah. But one of my favorite games there. Did you guys ever test it without having the secret agent as part of the game? Like, just having everyone compete for points naturally? Or did you always have, like, secret agent component?
So it's interesting you ask that. We had like a lot of variations of this game. So like it was sort of, I remember day 1, like Anna came in and was like, okay, there's a few things I absolutely want in our games roster. And one of them is I want a word game, because we were all kind of like high on Wordle and stuff like that at that point. But also we were aware that, okay, this is the first English language version. This is a unique sort of thing we can do that the other versions haven't done. Like there hasn't been a version of a Genius Game main match that relies on like English. So we talked about like a version of it where it's like, okay, you've all got your own secret word and you can like play words. You can either like spread play a word, so you can like guess a word and it plays against everyone and you get points for like near misses, or you can like laser a word on someone else and think, I think your word is this thing. And it was very complicated game. I can explain the rules to you some other time. And then we had a version of it that was like, okay, you've got a bank of letters and you are spelling words from that bank to try and like win out the round, but you only have a limited supply of letters. And so you're kind of like trying to see what other people have used versus not used. I think we did test a version of this without the agent. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think the worry was that you might end up in a position where everyone just works together. And we were desperate to not, because we are so used to British reality TV, which is like, to some degree, either everyone is arguing and fighting or everyone is working together as one big cozy unit. And we definitely didn't want to end up in a position where, I mean, you see this in game 1 when Pasha talks about like, oh, well, we could all just play fair and evenly. And if that had happened, I would have been gnawing my own face off because I'm like, I don't know what this show is now. So I think the secret agent was added as sort of, okay, we are guaranteed that someone is going to be in an antagonistic role here.
The secret agent was guaranteeing that everyone will not work together.
Oh, 100%. Zach, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. Yeah, look, as I say, Ben was a force to be reckoned with. Like, we did not see Ben coming.
It really goes to show how hard it is to design stuff like this, because you design this one role for the explicit purpose of being like, we don't want this one outcome, so we're going to design a role around it, and then some guy takes that role and uses it to do that exact same thing, just in the reverse.
Yeah.
So now it's not to make sure that everyone solves it, it's to make sure that nobody solves it. I mean, look, I loved how Ben played. I think that maybe even having more Bens in there, like Ben, I think that if Ben was one of the people trying to solve, he would not go along with that plan, you know?
Oh,
so if there was one more Ben in the casting to oppose that, the whole thing probably fell apart.
And like, yeah, don't get me wrong, I don't want to come across as like I'm saying, oh, Ben ruined it. Like, Ben played phenomenally. Like, Ben played the way I would have wanted to have played, being like, oh, constantly doing these unexpected things, constantly making sure that I'm in the action, like never letting myself like just be a sort of background character. I think some people can find that abrasive. I personally believe that's because people, you know, Genius Game superfans might see too much of themselves in Ben. But yeah, like for me, I'm like, yeah, more Bens would have been great.
Yeah. I do want to ask you, so I feel like the highlight of the whole season for everyone was episode 7. Phenomenal main match, phenomenal death match. What was your involvement in that game specifically? And like, where do you what do you think it was about that game that worked so well compared to the others?
So I'm not going to take full credit because obviously it's a whole team effort. But like, Media Moguls was like the game I had come in with the most involvement in. Like, I'd sort of had my hands on all of the games to some degree. Like, we talked, like all of the main matches had gone through a very collaborative process. But Media Moguls was the one game that made it on that I sort of came to the room with, and I was like, okay, I've got this game. I think it works. I'd be interested to see it played. And then the game that you saw is more or less that game. Originally it was called Angel Investors. I've actually got, this is the original, that's the original notes. I don't know if that's mirroring, but yeah, that's
no, I see it, yeah.
So yeah, that's originally what the game was. That was Angel Investors back then. But it's the same game. It's like players invest in 4 companies. They all begin with 100,000 K. Originally it was originally the companies were called like Sang M Industries and Jin Holdings. I'm a nerd. But yeah, that was the sort of game, was like, okay, it's a resource war, you know, like it's essentially, you've got this much of a thing, you need to keep yourself in play, but you can't use up too much of your resource. And everyone seemed to like it. And I didn't know it was going to be the game until I was literally there in testing. And then up comes Media Moguls, which I'm like, I don't know what Media Moguls is. And then they start explaining the rules. I'm like, oh my God, this is Angel Investors. Like, I'm in the studio and we're about to play Angel Investors. This is so wild. I then played it and sucked at it. I'm really bad at that game. I actually ended up crying on set because I ended up having to betray someone to not come last. And it totally broke me. But yeah, that was sort of like my involvement. Was I came up with that game sort of independently. It was one I'd had in the bank for a while, because I was designing main matches from before the show had existed. I was like, you know, like all of us, I'm just idly daydreaming about these things all the time.
Was the Ken like bounce check strategy something that had come up in the playtesting and something that like was designed as a mechanic of the game, or was that all on him?
So it's not something that had come up in testing. Like, no one had bounce to check. And I feel weird saying, it was the plan all along, because I don't want to take credit. Like, that was Ken's move. But again, it goes back to that mantra that I certainly had, and I think the team had, of we don't want there to be like a solution. Like, we want there to be like, okay, there are rules that have little holes in them that you can sort of perforate, and you can do something cool with that. So like, we definitely left gaps that we were like, okay, we can speculate what they do. And like, I think some of us had said, okay, maybe you could like, you know, overshoot on purpose. But we weren't really sure what that would achieve. We were like, okay, you could do this, but we don't know why you would. And then when we saw Ken playing it out, I mean, notably, I wasn't in the room at the time. Someone was like WhatsApping me, like play by play, like, oh my God, Ken's doing it, Ken's doing it. We were all just thrilled. Like that was like, oh, cool. That was one of the only times really where it was like, okay, we had left this to be filled in by someone and they did it. And yeah, it was thrilling. Like, I'm so happy it happened. Because there was a few times, like, I think Ken's talked about, like, oh, I was considering doing this, but I didn't. And it was like, I just would have done it because it was goofy and cool. And I was like, that's what we need more of. We need more of people doing goofy and cool things.
Do you think that if it was more, one more quick thing, do you think it was more like celebrity, like I hate to be that guy, but if it was more like influencer types who really just cared about screen time versus these like real smart, like maybe a little bit more conservative players, do you think that would have been the difference?
It's tricky because, again, I think it comes down to like how celebrity differs in various places. Because I know Fishback talked on a past episode about like, you know, you would have got more of these plays if the cast were celebrities. I just don't think that show exists ultimately. Like, I don't think there are enough people that we could have got with celebrity status in the UK that would be able to play at that level and would want to. Like, I've done a few like dream casts of like, okay, if you were gonna put a cast of people together from the UK celebrity scene, who would they be? And there are about 20 names, and about half of those names are already priced out from day dot. Like, they just don't want to do it. They don't want to risk their reputation of being a clever person like going out the window, because you can't really recover from that. So yeah, it's tricky. Like, ultimately, you know, again, talking what we were saying, you just want more Bens. You want more people who, regardless of their level of status, are willing to play loudly and boldly.
Yeah.
In any other games you guys created, were there any mechanics that got cut that you were intending to be a part of the game and just had to cut out for different reasons, or any like major mechanics that you could think of that were like you really liked, really intriguing, and just didn't really work out in the game at the final cut?
Yeah, so I mean, the big one is, I think it would have been talked about when you guys talked about Safari Race, was that there was a like nick on the zebra tokens that no one found. So it was like, you know, we tried having like the exploit. Yeah. We had a little exploit that we were like, okay, you can like, we gave them the chips for 15 minutes and Ben was sniffing them. But that was the thing, was like, there was a little, if you ran your finger around it, it caught on it. And we were like, okay, maybe if they find that, maybe we'll go on to like, that will be useful to them in some way.
Yeah, that sucks. Because one of the things we were complaining about was we were like, there should have been a trick to the tokens. There was a trick.
I think the reason that we didn't have more of those is we hated the idea of having to do what they did in Constellation game, of being like, look, you dummies, there was this thing the whole time. Like, there was no real elegant way for us to point out that they had missed something. Because that's the reason that the zebra thing doesn't come up. It's like, beyond getting David Tennant to like hold up a zebra chip and run his fingernail across it in some weird ASMR way, I don't know how we can say that this happened and they didn't catch it. But yeah, potentially if we'd had the ability to like steer people towards exploits more, I would have liked there to have been a few more of those. Ultimately, thinking back to the other games, I was sad for various reasons that Light's exchange happened the way it did. I keep going to call it light domination because that's what it was called early doors, and then we realized that sounds too much like a sex thing. But there was
what? Yeah, it's not
there was a strategy that I was like really excited by when we tested light exchange, that I was hoping would have come up. Like, I think there's so much room in that game to do really cool and interesting things. And then it ultimately just didn't happen because the game sort of got kiboshed. But during testing, basically one of the things you can do is that if you've got 3 people, you can hold enough of every color that no one can complete their set. So basically you can have 3 of every color and then 2 of the yellows, or one that there's 7 of. And if you got that, no one else can win the game without you. So you're able to let people sort of trade forever and ever, and then eventually they'll realize, oh, something's not happening, and then you reveal it is us. You need to come and woo us, and then we'll let you win the game.
And that is there a win? What's the end condition if those three choose not to hold game hostage? Do they then win, or could someone from the outside still force a win based on win cons?
I'll level with you, Dwight. I'm not sure what we ended up doing in studio. I don't know what the condition was for indefinite play in that case. I believe we were just of the opinion that like the game will end.
Someone will give up. Yeah.
What about Cory's strategy, which was, guys, everyone should just lock in right now, round 1. If you don't have the black box, there's no reason for you not to do this. And then we can just kill this person within the first 5 seconds.
I'm so thrilled.
This is why you shouldn't cast. Yeah, this is why you shouldn't cast Cory on these shows.
No, but you say that, but then I'm pretty sure Charlotte was trying to do that as well. Like Charlotte had talked about doing that.
Everyone would be like, "That sounds like a great plan," except for like the one guy who'd be like,
"Let's play the game. You're on board with this, right?" Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there is a level of trust that you have to instill in your players, where it's like, okay, if you know you can do a thing, and you know it's gonna ruin it, don't do that thing.
Like please make good TV.
Yeah, like I think there is a level of that. Like we don't want to manufacture anything. Like you want the reason that people love Genius is like it is organically good fun. Like it is organically people being clever.
Yeah,
and it's a similar thing to the closest parallel weirdly over here is Taskmaster. Like we've got which is just a show where comedians are tasked with doing really stupid stuff. But again, that is a show where it's like there are not solutions. It is like, okay, it is open for you to interpret to some degree what you want to do, and the cleverer things you do, the better you'll look. And yeah, that's something that would be refined, I think, going forwards. It's part casting, part design.
One more question, just in terms of like the games as a whole. Did you guys consider having like an open pass or God's Judgment style game in there? I feel like those have always been such highlights of the South Korean Genius. Those episodes in particular are like 2 of my favorites. Something where it's like, I know we already talked about like there was a trick to the chips, but something where like the whole game revolves around like these props that you have to like collect and figuring out what the secret behind them is. Was that in the planning at all?
Yeah, we discussed it because obviously it's like, you look it up on YouTube, the first thing that comes up is Jinho Soul's Open Pass. Like it was something that we were definitely like, okay, can we make a new one of these? And I think the sort of hurdle we ended up with was, okay, we don't want it to be too similar to Open Pass because we don't want to look like we're just doing the same thing. And like we want it to be a new version of what this is. And also we're aware that we're going to have some players who have seen the original. So we know they're going to be looking for exploits. Like we know that, Ben is going to be sniffing the chips. If we hand them a prop, they're going to be trying to like interface with the prop. So we had, I think ultimately what happened is we just didn't ever land on something that felt really clever enough, that felt like different enough. There was a few, again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of stuff we didn't do because ultimately, like, if it does come back, those might be my only good ideas to get rehired. But there was one idea that like I'd had for if we had a sort of game that involved like random movement. So, would use a dice, but instead of using a dice with 1 to 6, we would have like a big vat of ping pong balls. And it was like, okay, so let's say those ping pong balls are all randomly numbered 1 to 6. So sort of like in lieu of minor game, you reach in and grab something.
Sure.
And there's this idea in physics, I think it's called the Brazil nut effect, which is that if you've got a vat of things of different sizes, eventually the things that are larger will rise to the top if you shake them up. So we were like, okay, if we made it that the 6 balls were a little bit larger and the 1 balls were a little bit smaller and they were all sort of like kind of indistinguishable, but if someone figured out they were different, they would know that, okay, these are different sizes. Eventually, when you swirled it up enough, you could just always get yourself a 6. Like you would know all the 6s are at the top of this pile.
Wow.
Incredible.
And that was something I'd pitched. The problem was it was like too sciencey. It was like, okay, this requires you to. It's sort of like that time when they made pi show up in the Korean version. It was like, oh, it's because one girl knows the first 100 digits of pi.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Basically, it was like, okay, that's a cool thing. Similar to Open Pass, it was like, it's cool. Like, it's cool that this exists, but you sort of need to guarantee that someone will figure it out. So there was this really fine balance of, okay, we've got these ideas and we know that we can do something that if you figure out the trick, it's going to look really cool. But if you don't figure out the trick, this game will kind of look random.
I think it could still work as they realize, like, even if they don't understand the science behind that, I think that could still work in a, oh, wait, we've noticed the ones are a little bit smaller and the sixes are a little bit bigger. Okay, we can search that. Wait, we're realizing that, like, you know,
the deeper you go in,
the deeper you go in, the more, like, they could have figured that out, I think, without knowing the science behind it.
It's tricky to put a game through testing like that when you can't guarantee it's going to happen. But yeah, I think if we did it again, like, ultimately I would definitely want us to have something in it that's like on that level of a God's Judgment or an Open Pass. It's just, yeah, it's like, what else is there to do? Like, we need to figure out what's the cool prop that, like, feels gamey enough.
Gotcha. Okay. Unless I've got one more question. Dwight, do you have any more questions?
Go for it. Yeah, I'm out.
I guess my final question in all this, and I'm sure this is one that you probably will not have an answer for right now. Obviously, we would love to see the show come back for a second season. We'd love to see it, the Genius franchise continue to grow. Where does that look right now? And is there anything that, like, the fans can do in terms of, like, helping the Genius's chances?
Well,
any tricks to the game?
I can't exclusively reveal to you, Zach. I have no news. I wish I did. But yeah, currently it's kind of in the ether. I know as much as all of you guys do. But yeah, I think it'll come down to, does it suit ITV to do it again? My personal opinion is that it would. ITV are a very good and lovely channel, and I love them a lot. But also, they've given, like, a lot of shows a second go around, and almost all of those shows have improved in quality. They have fixed their problems. And ultimately, like, I think the whole team would say, like, if we get a second go at this, we've learned a lot, and we would be able to make a show that is more authentic again. Like, we've seen, we've shown it can be done. Like, episode 7 shows that, like, okay, there is a version of this show that looks the way the original does and plays the way the original does. The best thing that people can do is just keep talking about it. Just, like, keep talking about it on Reddit, keep talking about it on social media. I know a big part of, like, my job, after we'd finished recording was, okay, can you show that people are talking about this show? Because, ultimately we live in an age of streaming first. We live in an age of the show doesn't end when it stops airing on television. And the more people are, like, there's been fan art made of, like, Genius UK, and that's great. That's like, okay, that's a thing that, like, other reality shows on UK television don't get. And, like, ultimately, like, other UK reality shows don't get talked about on RHAP. Like, I think it's really great, and thank you so much that you guys are talking about it. I guess, I don't want to be too pessimistic about it. If it didn't come back, I don't think that would be the end of Brain's survival in English territories. Like, I would hope that either it shows up somewhere else or a similar show shows up somewhere else, because ultimately this has shown that, like, there is an appetite for this sort of thing.
Here's what I think the pitch should be. I think you should go in and be like, all right, season 2, we are going to make garnets so valuable in the games. People will be spending 20 garnets per episode. It'll be a prize pot of $5,000. Okay. We can guarantee these contestants will not be getting a dime. Like, the winner will be who spends the most money, who gives the most money back to you guys.
So what we're going to do is we're going to put the whole set underwater. We're going to put it in a sort of a large water tank, one of those sound stages. All the contestants are wearing scuba suits. The only way they can refill their oxygen tanks is by spending garnets.
Yes. It's last gasp, genius.
Last gasp. I'll just put on last gasp. This is good TV, guys. It's working in the States.
Guys, there's a trick. There's a trick to the tank. There's an air bubble in the bottom right corner. Did you watch Squid Game at all? The actual one, not the reality one.
Oh yeah, no, I love Squid Game. I mean,
you watched
it was
the most recent season.
I have not watched 3 yet. I'm about to. I've heard some of what happens at the end, but
I was just gonna
I
was just gonna say that there's some of like the game strategies that they like come up with, like the bad guys will come up with mid-game, and you're supposed to be like, oh my god, they're so evil, I can't believe you do that. I'm watching that and I'm like, oh, see, this is like how they should play the genius. Like,
right. It's like clever, like I love this.
Yeah, you'll get to something called the lunchbox in a later episode. I'm like, oh yeah, the lunchbox strategy. Oh, that's brilliant.
We should give them knives.
Yes. That'll be perfect. All right. Well, season 2. It sounds like there's a lot of ideas. We're definitely going to be fighting for it. And I hope the audience does as well. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else that we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about from the Genius experience? Anything we missed?
I'm trying to think. I will say, okay, I'm not going to say what it is because it's not my place to do it. There was a thing that changed each episode that no one found. Like there was like a little Easter egg on the set that, like, as far as I know, was visible, and no one ever found it. Like no one said what it was. So if people want to go back and watch those episodes several times on ITVX, please, then that would be great.
Okay. Awesome. Is there any prize for whoever it is that finds it? Anything that we can incentivize them with?
Yeah, it's something that happens in the bar, and if anyone finds it, I will make them my banner image on Blue Sky.
Look at that. Okay.
Lovely.
Wow, what a prize. Alex, where can everybody find you, and what do you have going on next?
Yeah, I am on Blue Sky at Undeniably Alex, and I'm at Undeniably Alex on most places. Currently, I am working on a few different shows. Hopefully, a certain Garnet-related show again in the future. Other than that, publicly, I do stand-up. If you're ever in the UK and you see Kaylee Ray Minogue on a tour poster, please come and say hello. That's me. And I'm also running a comedians version of The Traders in Belfast called The Touts, which is 10 comedians getting given clues about who's screwing them over and not understanding it. That next one's on October 2nd. If you happen to be in Northern Ireland, please come along.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah. Excuse me. And Dwight, where can people find you, and what do you have going on?
Primarily, social media is my thing. On Twitch, doing more. I just run the Clock Tower games very often over there, so come check that out anytime.
Dwight, do you have any plans on getting the Genius cast in on these Blood in the Clock Tower games?
I would love to, considering I learned the game from watching Ken and his group on the Rose Bard, so I would love to have them on stream sometime. That'd be amazing.
Okay, I think they're gettable. I think that, like, I see them online. They're playing a lot of games.
They've already played Clock Tower.
Yeah.
They've not played it with you yet, though.
No,
right.
They have not. So I need to get them all. I just messaged them like join now. The problem is the time difference, but I'll do it at like 3 a.m. I don't care. I love that. Yeah. So
be careful who you get, though. We if we get Benjamin, it might be like, guys, I'm the imp. Do not vote for me.
I want Benjamin more than anything in the world. I want to see Ben play Clock Tower.
Everyone just show your cards right now. There's no reason to not show your cards.
You say your role right now in Town Square. Zach, you played like this when we first started playing. I don't want to hear it.
That's true, yeah. And check the comments. It's people complaining about me.
It's just like, Zach tells the truth too much.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining. Apologies again, Cory couldn't come. I know he's the real star here, but he's busy. I think he's in Greece right now.
That seems like a better offer. I'm not gonna complain.
Sounds pretty fun. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. We should have some deep dives coming up with a few of the cast members once Cory gets back from Greece. But until next time, thank you for listening.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.